Hey, everybody, welcome on in to the Dog Check Podcast, part of the Bleav network of podcasts, airing weekly as well on Bally Sports Great Lakes. I'm Spencer German, excited to be back with you. I talked about it last week. We're officially this week in the month of June, which means, at least in my perspective, the NFL season's right around the corner. We're getting pretty close. Training camps, we're going to be talking about that in like a month and a half from now. So it's an exciting time of year, and I'm excited to be joined by former NFL quarterback Matt Sims this week on the show. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Matt, I can't thank you enough for giving us some time. I want to share this story. So I covered the Bills for a short period of time early in my career, and I was there from 2015 to 2017. So we crossed paths, not really knowing who each other were at all. But I had a chance to watch you do something I don't know if I've seen any quarterback do, which is throw the ball behind you when you were trying to avoid a sack in a preseason game against the Lions. How did that all happen, man? What was going through your head in that moment?
It was a very Will Ferrell-like moment. I don't know, man. I just blacked out. But, hey, I throw the ball backwards in the NFL better than a lot of dudes throw it forward. So not my proudest moment. Fortunately for me, I was cut by the Bills that next day, and then on my way to Atlanta to play for the Atlanta Falcons, Kyle Shanahan and Matt Ryan, and I was on my way to greener pastures despite my snafu there in that game.
Yeah, and I like that you're able to laugh about it now and be a good sport about it. It was a comical moment for everybody, but
Hey, what can I do?
it happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
Listen, if I had been out there trying to do anything like that, I probably would have looked even worse. So, listen, it worked out for the best, and you ended up in a place that was obviously better for you. I want to talk specifically as we do with the show just about the Browns and their quarterback situation. We know Deshaun Watson is going into a very high pressure year ahead where the Browns roster is stacked again. They're coming off a playoff run, high expectations. I kind of felt like last year there was a lot of pressure on the team as a whole and the coaching staff to get the job done. Well, now they delivered. So now the question really is just all of it's centered around Deshaun Watson and what he's going to bring to the table, what he's going to do, and if he's going to be able to perform. As you watch Deshaun Watson, do you Bleav that there still is an elite level quarterback in there like we saw now going on for almost 5 years back in 2020?
I do. I still Bleav in Deshaun Watson, the talent on the football field and what he can bring to a team. Was there a lot of growing pains last year? There's no doubt. I feel like there was that kind of almost uncomfortable feeling to, being the leader, being out there on the field, making the proper decision consistently. That's something that my father and I discussed at length as we ranked our quarterbacks here for the AFC North. I had Deshaun at 3. Big Phil actually had him at 4. And the biggest thing really that I put him at 3 is, one, he's going against Lamar and Joe Burrow, right? So, of course, we're not going to stack him above there, right? But he has the physical capability of still being a dynamic football player on the field. Now, his running ability is absolutely not what it used to be, right, in Houston. His rushing stats have declined, dramatically over these past few years, the last few years that he's played. But the throwing ability is still there. The playmaking ability is still there. The cerebral aspect of him just being a guy that's played a lot of football and has a ton of experience is there. And I think I just have great faith, too, in Kevin Stefanski, who I think did one of the greatest coaching jobs in the entire NFL league last year, with just managing his football team, and to go along with Schwartz in this defense. Deshaun Watson's playing with house money in my eyes. So now it really just is up to the individual, to kind of live up to the expectations of his salary and what his impact really is meant to be to the team. And that's just being a leader, making great decisions, managing the football game, and obviously just staying available consistently.
Yeah, and obviously the injuries are a big part of that conversation as well. He's coming off the shoulder injury. He's got to be able to stay healthy and stay in the field in order to deliver for this team. When you watch his tape, when you go back and watch him play in the games that he did play in last year, is there anything that stands out that you think is maybe a roadblock for him, or anything that's holding him back, whether it's a technique standpoint, or maybe a mental standpoint or a physical standpoint? Like, what looks different about him from that 2020 season when he led the league in passing?
Yeah, sometimes for whatever reason, when I feel like I'm watching his film, it almost seems like he's surprised occasionally by the decision, right? And that's something to me that that's a lack of repetition. That's a lack of understanding from what the coach and the play and the scheme and the defense that you're going up against. So I feel like, again, another year of being in the room with Kevin, absorbing that information, really starting to kind of both of them to think more alike on the football field is key, because there were so many times where I feel like, okay, like the guy's open, turn and cut it loose. And it was kind of like, wait a tick, didn't quite trust it, and then throw it. And I feel like this is where he kind of had some of those issues, especially early on in the season. We did see flashes of it, right, where we're like, man, this is old Deshaun Watson, especially in that Baltimore Ravens game early in the year, where you're saying, man, okay, this is the playmaker that we remembered. But there was also a lot of moments, though, too, where you're just like, man, he just doesn't look, as polished as he once was. So this is where I go back to the coaching and why it's so important in the NFL. I just have tremendous faith in Kevin Stefanski, and the fact that they've been together longer, gives me at least more hope than some others in that division right now with the roster that they have too. And let's find, Deshaun didn't get to know David Njoku very well. Joe Flacco did, right? Deshaun, get to know David Njoku a little bit better, man, because I think he is, that ultimate weapon for them to kind of help Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, right, and Amari Cooper eat more consistently throughout their offense because of his skill set that he brings.
Yeah, it's not bad to have a two-time reigning coach of the year as your head coach, and certainly year 3 they can sort of work on some things. I also think too, and this has been a big topic of conversation here in Cleveland, obviously, the change in offensive coordinator. We don't know yet. Kevin Stefanski's kept it very close to the vest, just who's going to call the plays, what that's going to look like. But with bringing in Ken Dorsey, they're sort of hoping to unlock this different version of Deshaun and build an offense that's to his liking, fits his skill set, some of the things that you brought up. What do you think Ken Dorsey and the addition of him to this staff, coming from Buffalo, also before that coming from Carolina, where he's worked with other elite level quarterbacks in their prime, Cam Newton, Josh Allen, most notably. What can that do, you think, for Deshaun Watson next season?
Yeah, it really is an interesting dynamic, because I think one of Kevin's great skill sets as a play caller too is to really win at the line of scrimmage consistently in the run game, to really put the defense in a tremendous amount of pressure with making sure that they kind of fill every gap, play the run game, play the play action passing game, which allows that normal drop back passing game to be even more expanded as the game goes on, to physically wear out opponents, which I think is something that he's done extremely well. Now you bring in Ken Dorsey, and I feel like his history of his offense is a little bit more spread out, maybe a little bit more college-like, but this is exactly what was done with Deshaun Watson in Houston with Bill O'Brien in that offense. Very spread out offense, big formation, spread the field, give Deshaun a lot of space to observe the field, pick the side, make quick decisions, then scramble and make plays with his feet. So I hope there is a really nice mesh of these two worlds coming together in the future for this Cleveland Browns offense, because I don't want Kevin to go too far away from what has made him so successful in the NFL. So that'll be really his biggest job, is blending those two worlds and helping his quarterback succeed in what he does well, but also staying true to what his identity is too, and that being a physical, creative offense, both running and passing.
It's a really good point, especially because, I mean, let's face it, Kevin Stefanski was hired. He was brought in to be the offensive mind that he is. Like, that's part of the reason why he got this job in the first place. It's a skill set that, Andrew Berry this offseason has talked about how they consider that a strength of his. Others in the organization have talked about that. So to have that maybe stripped away from him would seem odd. I guess, Matt, do we make too big of a deal in the media? Like, I'm curious your thoughts on this, as from a quarterback lens, somebody who's been in that room and worked with different coaches. Do we make too big of a deal out of who's calling the plays? Because that's a topic of conversation. It's not just the Browns. Like, across the NFL, we're always talking about, like, who's calling the plays and why does it matter? Why does it not matter? So how big of a deal is it really? Who's responsible for that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. It's something that I think honestly does not get discussed enough in the NFL. I think this is why we see a lot of the same teams consistently competing for championships too, like an Andy Reid, like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Kyle Shanahan, because they are guys that really can create this symphony, right, consistently on the offensive side of the football, and make, chicken salad out of chicken doo-doo consistently, and that's the thing. That's what's so impressive. And to me, coaching is everything. It really is. It's something that I feel like we don't put an emphasis enough on in the media. It's more so about the players. But, the chicken and the egg, what came first, I don't know. But every great coach that we've ever had in the game, you can usually pair that, especially on the offensive side, right, with a great quarterback. And there is no coincidence there at all. So I think for this, there's no way Kevin Stefanski is going to hand off the calling duties to Ken Dorsey. I think
Mm.
Ken Dorsey, you should sit there and say, Kevin, teach me everything that you know. So a few years from now, I can take those tools and become a great play caller myself outside of, what he taught me. That's what the great ones do. They don't try to recreate the wheel. They just find a new way to call it their own, right? And add their own brand name to it. And that's something that I saw multiple times too, even in Atlanta. Steve Sarkisian, great football coach. He came in here and he was like, hey, what is Kyle Shanahan doing? Because he's getting people wide open in this offense. He took a little bit of what he knew, he added a little bit of that Kyle Shanahan mix, and he's been extremely successful since then. So Kevin Stefanski is not going to give up the coaching calling duties at all, right? He has to continue to do that because he is the great orchestra of how it goes. Ken Dorsey's just going to be a great tool to add to that think tank process in the behind the scenes. Even a guy like Tommy Rees and his experience in the college level, I think will add to that. So it'll be an interesting dynamic. But yeah, coaching is something that I think we don't talk about enough in the NFL game.
Well, first of all, we pride ourselves on trying to be a family show, so I appreciate you keeping it clean.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly,
Yeah.
secondly, I'm glad you said that because it's a topic of conversation here in Cleveland constantly, and I sometimes get a little skittish talking about it because it's like we've talked about play calling so much now, but
Yeah.
you're telling me like it's important, like it is an important thing for us to know.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything,
Yeah.
man. It really is. And I'm sorry to cut you off because
No, you're good.
I just get so excited, about this aspect of it because I think it is so underappreciated. I was in the NFL. I got to Atlanta. I sat in the room with Kyle Shanahan, and I was like, whoa, like this is a whole nother way of attacking a defense. There's so much thought into it. There's so much things that go into just the minor details of building and stacking plays from day one till day, the last day of the season, essentially. And I think that really is the beauty of the game, and these guys really who do it well, they're great composers. They're the Mozarts. There's the Bach of football. And we have to appreciate that when it's done well. And Kevin Stefanski is absolutely one of them. And that's what's interesting about this, because your offense too has to fit a little bit of your team's demographic and culture. And what's the dog pound? The dog pound isn't, oh, it's all pretty, it's finesse. No, it's a dirty, grimy football game played on grass still, in a cold weather environment that it needs to kind of match that. The same thing with Buffalo, right? The same thing with Green Bay. Like there needs to be that balance of still being a tough football team with this aggressive passing attack as much as possible when you're the coach of these teams. And I think a lot of these coaches have done a great job doing that with their respected areas that they play in.
Well, hey, hearing that from a former NFL or a former quarterback, it carries some weight. I appreciate hearing it, and we're glad to get your insight on all of this. Just to remind you guys to like, follow, subscribe, and review the Dog Check podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Bleav network of podcasts, of course. And this week, we have the pleasure of having Matt Sims join us here on the show. I know you and your dad had a chance to talk about the quarterbacks across the board in the AFC North. And I thought you alluded to this ranking earlier. I'm curious kind of how that ranking sort of flushed out between you two of where you considered these guys within the power structure of the division.
Yeah, to me, it was really easy. Actually, well, the 3 and 4 spot was easy. The 1 and 2, that was where it's debatable. Number 1 in the division, I had Lamar Jackson. I just feel like after the year that he had last year, I know coming up short in the playoffs, all that, but just he had to be numero uno in my eyes. The growth at the position, the ability to adapt his game, right, as a passer, right, with their offense, I think was tremendous, right? Joe Burrow, not to say that he is a lesser player, but just the health issue is also very similar to Deshaun. It is something that kind of continues to pop up, but also for Lamar as well. And you know what we're learning? Injury is just part of the game at quarterback, man. It
Yeah.
really is.
What
And
was it
really
like?
the biggest,
Something like 60 plus different quarterbacks started
yes.
games last year, and 5 of them obviously were for Cleveland alone.
Right, right. So we got close to 70 different quarterbacks starting in the NFL. And that's a number that I think we honestly should get comfortable, kind of seeing almost every other year in the NFL, right? And it really doesn't matter how experienced you are, doesn't matter how talented you are, how big and strong you are, or how limber you are. The fact is that the dudes that are hitting you are just, are that powerful and explosive, and it's a punishing position to play. But to go back to those rankings, Joe was number 2. I put Deshaun at 3, and that's really more so a projection for where I believe him to be as a football player, right? And also, too, with his surrounding cast. I have tremendous faith in Kevin Stefanski, like I said earlier. I also have tremendous faith in their skill group, their protection of the offensive line, and just their whole team dynamic as a whole, more so than the Pittsburgh Steelers and their quarterback carousel that they're trying to figure out right now. So I feel like Deshaun has better weapons available. He has a more solidified defense and defensive superstars on the opposite side, including led by another great coach in Jim Schwartz on that side of the football. And I just feel like they have the ability to move up the rankings within their division a little bit more easily, I think, than the Pittsburgh Steelers do right now. But of course, once the season starts, I could be proven wrong real quick because that's what Mike Tomlin does consistently.
While we're on the subject of the Steelers, I'm curious what you think of how they handled their quarterback room this offseason. We know these GMs, it's not easy for them to sort of swallow their pride. And I guess in Pittsburgh, it's a little bit different because the previous GM wasn't there, the one that technically drafted Kenny Pickett. But,
Right.
Mike Tomlin was there, and he was a big reason why, a big motivating factor behind that. But it takes a lot to sort of swallow your pride as an organization, move on from a quarterback that you used a first round pick for that soon, to realize you got to do something differently here. So what'd you think of both the decision to move on from Kenny Pickett, bring in Russell Wilson, bring in Justin Fields, and how do you sort of see that competition? Because I know they're not calling it that, but I think from the outside looking in, we all can kind of see there might be something there. How do you think that sort of sorts itself out?
I mean, listen, it's a competition, man. And even when I was in Atlanta and I knew that I was the third quarterback on the roster, I was still competing with Matt Ryan, right? And that's just natural, right? You kind of have to do that, right? If you're not doing that, then you shouldn't be playing the game in the first place. And, for Pittsburgh, this is really interesting. I've never seen, Mike Tomlin, I feel like, be in a situation like this. And I'm really curious because if there's someone that can figure it out, I would believe that it is someone like a Mike Tomlin. I do believe that this football team is going to end up actually playing both throughout the season. I think there are going to be a named starter, but I would not be shocked if there are at times where you see them on the field multiple times together or on the field sparingly in different moments of the game, depending on situation and what is being asked in that game at that moment. So I would say if I had to guess at the moment, Russell Wilson's your starter and Justin Fields is brought in, intermittently every now and then for specific athletic things that he can do well with his feet, with the play action passing game. And wouldn't be shocked either if Arthur Smith conducts an offense too, where both of them on the field at the same time, just to kind of put defenses in a bind too, and put more thought process on the defensive coordinators to prepare for things that maybe aren't necessarily a part of their game plan. But if two quarterbacks are on the field at the exact same time, that means that guys like Jim Schwartz have to sit there and think, all right, they can possibly do this, they can do this, they can do this. And as defensive coordinators waste time with those type of things, it takes time away from the other stuff that they do really, really well or focus on with their offense. So I think Arthur Smith can really do a great cat and mouse game, right, with their offense, with their quarterback situation, and make the best of it.
I'll get you out of here with this, Matt. We heard Joel Bitonio, obviously veteran guard for the Browns, talk this week about the potential for an 18-game season and an 18th game being added to the schedule here in the near future. Roger Goodell's talked about that at length, and it seems like it's imminent that within the next maybe 3 to 5 years, we see this thing come to fruition, and then you're getting a President's Day weekend Super Bowl and all that. But from your perspective, because we talked earlier in the show about just the sheer number of quarterbacks that played last year and how it's going to be a growing trend that you see like 60 plus different quarterbacks start a game. Is it possible? I know the NFL is such a mammoth of a machine. Everybody tunes in. The ratings always seem to go up. But is there a tipping point for this league that you almost like, I don't even know if it's oversaturate your product, but you do yourself a disservice, because by adding another game, you're risking more injuries to key players, and that's what people are ultimately tuning in to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the injury factor. I mean, I don't care what Roger says. He'll give you something about like statistically, there's no proof that we'll have more
Yeah.
injury. Listen, man, Roger's never suited up in a uniform and been hit like that, so he has no idea what it's like for these men to get up and play that way, right, and to give it their all. And there really is just the fact of the matter that Thursday games typically are just not super physical. They're not. They're not physical games. Sunday by far is a totally different animal. I've been on a team where we played Thursday night games. They're just a little different. The lack of time to prepare, you don't get to put in as much great offensive firepower plays. Defenses have to really more focus on just recovering their football players. And the players themselves, I feel like, really haven't gotten over that hump day type of feeling to the week of playing the game. So, oversaturation, I think, is something that the NFL, they are going to go as far as they can to the tipping point of that. The problem is that it's kind of hard to reel it back, once you've gone
Yeah.
over that. So I feel like they have to be a little careful with, let's play a game Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all that kind of stuff. Because I can't lie. As much as I love the game, sometimes I'm just like, I don't give a damn about this Thursday night game, and I'm not watching it, right? Or at least I'm not
we got
watching it
lives,
past
man.
halftime.
We
Yeah,
got
I know.
lives.
So
Like
I got to go to
like,
bed at a decent hour,
right,
man. So
right.
I think there's a part of that for sure.
Yeah, it gets hard. Like I understand the ratings are going to say one thing, and it's going to keep telling them, "Hey, we got to keep doing this and expanding and growing." You got games on Christmas now, no matter what day of the week it is. I mean, if there was any year they would have avoided that, it would have been this year because it's on a Wednesday, and they're still
Right.
putting games on it. So at some point, I just wonder like where the drop off is, whether it's injuries, whether it's just like consumption and people just not having the time to consume everything that you're putting out there. But I think you make some interesting points, and you're right. Roger Goodell never know what it's like to put a uniform on and experience all that, even if he cites different numbers and things. So he again is Matt Sims. You can listen to his podcast that he hosts with his dad Phil, the Sims Complete podcast. They do a great job. You can hear the quarterback ranking they did for the AFC North. You can hear more opinions like he gave here on the show today. I thought you gave some great insight, Matt, and I truly can't thank you enough, man, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Spencer. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, Browns fans, for putting Deshaun at number 3. I apologize, but it's just the facts, man. Lamar and Joe are awesome right now. So Deshaun's got his work cut out for him, but huge fan of the Dog Pound, huge fan of Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski. And I hope the Browns have a great year this year. They are one of my sleeper Super Bowl contenders this year.
I like that. You landed the dismount. That perfectly plays for Browns fans to get back on board. They're like, man, this guy, he put Deshaun third in the division. Now they're back on board with you, Matt. So,
that's right.
Hey,
that's right.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate you. As for our fine listeners and viewers out there of the program, just to remind you again to like, follow, subscribe, and review the Dog Check podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, we're part of the Bleav network of podcasts and also air weekly on Bally Sports Great Lakes. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Talk to you guys again next week. And as always, go Browns.
Go Browns.